So
So yeah.
as per your experience, does a particular cartridge manufacturer have the typically same angle of slop or whatever that is there? Like, is it a plus 10-degree variation in the zenith, or is it random? Is it a random error that is due to sloppy manufacturing? Or is it like because they're using a particular machine, they get a particular kind of zenith error in all their cartridges, which you
Yeah,
then
well,
know how to fix?
so as I mentioned, there are 3 different manufacturers of stylus cantilever assemblies, right? And then the cartridge manufacturers buy from them.
Okay.
And yeah, there's one company that tends to have greater errors than the other two, and the one in Switzerland tends to actually be the tightest. But the other 2 companies are Japanese. But personally, I would prefer the Japanese models. Why? Because they
Yeah.
are made with this beautiful ridge line. This is
Okay.
called the minor. This ridge line is what mimics the cutting tool. And this ridge line, as it wears out, it's called the minor radius. As it wears out, it stays the same shape,
Okay.
right? So they last longer, right? And that's why I like them better. But I've got the means to determine what the error is, and that's what I help my clients with as well, using my tools or my services. And so I tell them, look, just because a cartridge is built with, let's say, the Swiss type of stylus cantilever assembly isn't enough of a reason to choose that cartridge. There are many other things that go into cartridge design, right? So does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
Okay, JR, just one more thing, just to slightly give a pause to the flow. There's a question from Amit from the audience. Amit, do you mind unmuting yourself and asking the question direct rather than me having to read out? Probably.
Sure. So the idea is the outermost tracks in any given LP will have better dynamics and better details compared to the innermost track in a given LP. So the we are progressing a lot digitally, and I was thinking, why is it that the industry did not switch towards having a progressive speed motor, which can actually increase the speed of the rotation as the tone arm moves progressively towards the center. That way, the inches covered per
Yeah.
second will remain constant, and it can give a same kind of dynamics.
Yeah, yeah. So I can't answer why they didn't. It would have been advantageous. However, I'm glad you brought this up. This question of inner groove. Often people refer to it as inner groove distortion. Okay, I'm glad you brought this up because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this. And I write when people mention to me, oh wait, well I'm having a problem. I'm getting a lot of inner groove distortion. I always ask the question, what does that sound like? And the answer almost always that I get is, well, I'm getting some sibilance, or I'm getting some obvious breakup or mistracking. It just sounds trashy and garbled, right? Okay. Now it is true that at the inner area of the record, the linear density of the information is much more compact than it is at the outer area of the record. It has also been studied quite well in the past and written about for public consumption that a misaligned stylus is more likely to mistrack as it gets into the inner area of the groove if it's misaligned, right? But and this is one thing that I'm trying to re-educate the public on. The obvious sibilance and mistracking isn't a stylus alignment problem. Yes, misalignment makes it more likely, but it doesn't finish the job. What causes mistracking and sibilance is the tone arm. The tone arm's horizontal torque forces are out of control, right? And this is a very unattended area of turntable playback. And this is why the Wally skater is my most important tool. Most all audibly negative experiences you will have with your turntable are caused by the tone arm. Okay, so either too much skating force, not enough anti-skating force, or too much friction in the bearings. That's what causes the phenomenon that most people experience as intergroove distortion. This is not something that I live with, okay? It's not something that people who follow my processes live with at all, okay?
So there is nothing like inner groove distortion in your world.
No, I mean,
Once
okay.
we do.
Now, let me, not intergroove distortion as the vast majority of people know it, okay? Now, let me address what intergroove distortion really sounds like. Apart, you know, when you don't have an out of control tone arm. Doesn't sound anything like sibilance or mistracking. It still sounds just as beautiful as anything else. It's just less of everything. It's a little bit less clarity, a little bit less focus to the soundstage, a little bit less transient attack and high frequency extension. But it's slight. Now, some people are very sensitive to it. One of the engineers on our research team is hypersensitive to it, okay? But he's really unusual. Few people can hear, and it's demonstrable though. Once we had Michael Fremer did a little experiment recording to digital. We found a record that was cut to less than the IEC minimum, which is 60 millimeters. It was like 56, 57 millimeters from the spindle. So it went too far. And he had on his turntable a linear tracker, which is not pivoted, right? When the advantage of a linear tracker over a regular pivoted arm is that the tracking error should be constant, right? Across the record surface. And then he had an arm that was a short arm and had an unusual alignment pattern, which also meant that at the inner area of the groove, it would experience a lot of intergroove distortion of the type I'm talking about, much more than the average 9-inch arm because of the alignment scheme that they chose. Well, across all of the most of the record, that 9-inch pivoted arm was definitely the better sounding arm, but it lost its advantage at that inner area where it started to fall apart a little bit. It was just the soundstage shrunk and a little less clarity and focus, and then the linear tracker had the advantage. But at no time did it ever sound like sibilance and mistracking, obvious distortion. It's not what it sounds like. Did that answer your question?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yeah, so there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in most people's systems, analog systems. We do not need to live with ticks and pops. Okay, and I'm not talking about you have to have a tick and pop removal machine, you know, because there's actually some devices that will filter those out electrically. And no, I wouldn't ever live with one of those. They're unnecessary, in my opinion. When people can hear it, when people can hear a well set up analog system, it's one of those jaw droppers. They're so rare, right? And not enough people have made the effort. And yes, there is some effort. It's not as easy as buying a CD player or a streamer, plug and play, and you go. It takes some effort, but the reward is obvious sonically. And so the more people that can hear this, the more people I think will be ready to do a little bit of the work that it takes to understand how to get your setup optimized. Yeah.
I know it's out there in a lot of videos that you've posted, but could you just walk us through your process for setting up and getting the optimal performance out of a turntable?
Yeah.
What should a customer, if he's got a turntable, what should he do in just brief?
I'm going to keep it basic.
Yeah,
basic. I'm going to keep it basic.
Yeah, basic.
If they want to see the details, they can go to the website.
Right.
If you're starting to get into this, and this is a good question. If you say, well, okay, I'm ready to take this dive and give analog a chance, right?
Yeah.
remember, we already discussed that the size of the prize in the groove can be read in the nanometer region, right? This is a transcription instrument, which means that the turntable itself should be isolated very well from its environment. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, vibration, and this vibration, which if you don't isolate your turntable from it, it will turn into part of what you hear. This vibration, the most likely source of vibration is going to be your speakers and your subwoofers. All right, which is why Norman Varney, who has been on your channel before, right? He sells these EVPs. I mean, these EVPs, which are fantastic to put underneath your speakers and subwoofers and your components for that matter. And these type of things are essential for making sure that the turntable can lose its connection with Mother Earth, so to speak, right? Now, for a real beginner, you might take an inner tube, a bicycle inner tube, right? And just blow it up so it's real soft and mushy, right? Real soft and mushy, right? And put that underneath there. Of course, you have to keep things level, right? You have to keep things level. So that can be a little challenging, right? But these things from AV Room Service are very cost effective.
We used to use squash balls,
yeah, well, even squash balls would be better than just putting the turntable on your credenza, for sure, right? But yes, footfalls, all these kind of things. This is a sensitive instrument, so the more we can isolate it from the vibration, the better it will perform for you. So spend some time attending to that and attending to the isolation. And then as far as the setup, yeah, look at the videos, my videos online, and don't underestimate the ability of that tone arm to screw up the performance, right? It only needs a small amount of errant horizontal force to start to deteriorate your performance, right? And that a cantilever, let me see, I'm gonna share my screen one more time. Here we go. Okay, so you see the photo?
Yeah.
Okay, so what we're looking at here is the underside of a cartridge, right? So here's a 6 millimeter long cantilever, and it goes through this is a magnetic pole piece, okay? This kind of gold looking thing. And this cantilever is attached rigidly to this iron, it's called a coil bobbin or coil former, around which the wires are wrapped, and that's the coil. Okay. Now, so it's 6 millimeter, and then underneath this damper, which is shaped like a donut, the pivot where this whole assembly pivots is in the center of that damper. So we got 6 millimeter long cantilever, and then it's about 1 millimeter from the pivot to the edge of the coil damper. So now there's a 6-to-1 lever arm here, which means that for every 1 unit of horizontal force that shouldn't be there, you have to multiply it by 6 on one side of this damper and minus 6 on the other side of the damper. But the damper is performing a very sensitive and important function. So the more you asymmetrically compress things, the easier it will be for your performance to start throwing off sibilance and mistracking, right? So it's this sensitive poor little damper, which is the cause of what many people think of when they hear the term inner groove distortion. This damper is not being well cared for. The arm is crushing it, right? And that causes sibilance and mistracking. That 6-to-1 lever arm is not well understood. So, yeah. So yeah, and a good vertical tracking force scale. There's in vinyl playback, it's all geometry and physics. That's it. Geometry and physics. There is no art to it. Don't
I was,
believe
I was
the
just going to come
golden.
to that.
There's no art
Many
to it.
people say it's an art to setting up a turntable.
No, for those who say it's an art, don't understand the geometry and physics.
Okay.
Okay. Now, with that said, we don't understand all of the physics because not all of it has been studied. For example, rake angle, which is, so here's a 1000-to-1 model of a groove. So I'm going to turn it so it's perpendicular to the camera. And I'm going to put the stylus in it, right? So here's one contact channel edge and the other one's on the other side. Rake angle is this angle.
Oh,
This has never been studied,
okay.
ever. There was an article in 1981, but it wasn't at all scientific at all. So after we're done with studying zenith air, we will study that, right? So not all of it is known yet, right? But we, it starts with, and this is why I've spent so much time with cutting engineers. You can't understand how to optimize the playback side unless you understand how records are cut. I even took, and I did a blog post on this. I went to Greece for 28 hours to spend with one of the 2 people in the world that are designing and making lathes and cutter heads. Most lathes and cutter heads used today are of the legacy version, the Neumanns, the Scullys and Westrex and Lyrex, right? And they're highly sought after. But there's a company in Australia, Silito, great name, and Agnew Analog in Greece, who I visited. They are designing and making new lathes and cutter heads. So, and these guys have also got lots of experience with the legacy version. So the Neumanns and the Scullys and such. So it's been important for me to spend time with them to make sure that it is understood how that groove is formed, right? Because that defines how we play it back, full stop. It's not an art, right? Now there's a lot, but there's a lot of misunderstandings. Like, for example, raising and lowering the tone arm. People think, well, I'm changing my SRA and VTA. Well, technically you are, but that's not what you hear. The distortion characteristics that are changed by raising and lowering the tone arm are dominated by vector forces, not SRA and VTA. And I got a video on that. Yeah. I see a question from Sandeep. How good is Panzerholz platter?
So Panzerholz essentially is a tank wood material, just in case we don't probably have the background of that. So it's tank wood, and it's used by a lot of designers of loudspeaker cabinets lately. It's a very highly damped material in that sense. So that's where the question comes from.
Yes, in fact, I think it was developed by the Nazi war machine as the floorboards
Right.
for tanks.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's the origin of the name Panzerholz also. It's a German thing.
Yeah,
Discovery.
yeah, and so yeah, it's loved for its rigidity and its machinability and its damping properties, right? It's very strong, right? So I'm I don't know that, as a platter material, I want rigidity, but we have to pay attention to something called mechanical impedance relationship between the vinyl and the platter surface. And these are conversations I love having with turntable designers. And it's an area that is now, particularly with laser interferometry and X-ray diffraction, we can really understand now with these tools. And X-ray diffraction, laser interferometry measures vibrations on the surface of things. X-ray diffraction measures what's happening with stresses inside of bodies. So I mean, the analytical powers we have are just fantastic. So I don't have an opinion on how good it is for platter material. There's so many variables. When people ask, like, we have to be careful with our opinions, because often what we render opinion about is about what we attribute what we hear to the wrong thing. right? Case in point, the one I just said about SRA and VTA, raising and lowering the arm, right? That you're not hearing SRA and VTA changing, something else dominates. So let's say I wanted to know what a Panzerhaubitz platter, how it sounded. I would need to have two identical turntables with two identical arms and cartridges, both of those cartridges optimally oriented, which few people do, right? And one with a Panzerhaubitz platter and one with something else, right? Or at least be able to quickly change the platter on this same table. That would probably be preferable. But few people do variable controlled testing. Few people even understand all of the variables at play when we compare A versus B, right? It's not as, unfortunately, that type of exercise isn't as easy as is commonly suggested. But it's knowable, Sandeep. The answer is knowable. I don't know it.
I think this is a very interesting topic because material science is a very relatively unexplored area in the realm of audio. And it opens up a plethora of opportunities in terms of the kind of materials that can be used for all the variety of equipment that exists in the audio chain, be it the end of the chain as loudspeakers, cabinets, and the variety of equipment within the loudspeaker itself. Let's say the driver materials, the cone materials, the cabinet materials, then things like that. And also on the side of the source side, the platter materials for the turntables. Material
Yeah.
science is a very vast topic to cover, and I don't think we should even attempt to talk about that right now in this session. I have been in touch with a gentleman by the name of Mike Glasgow. I don't know whether JR, are you aware of Mike Glasgow? He is a material science person and who's done a lot of research in the application of the variety of materials, particularly in the realm of audio. So I probably might have him in a future session to talk about materials and its applications. Anyway, just a quick point I want to make at this time. We are past the 1 hour
Yeah.
scheduled time, and I think barring probably maybe few people who join a bit late, I think. Does anyone have a question from their side right now based on what JR has covered so far? I think it's a very wide topic, as Mazban has alluded to earlier, and it can't we can't do justice to this topic in one session. So of course we are going to be having JR return for a future session, of course at a time of his convenience. But I would just maybe throw the floor open right now to a few audience questions. JR, is there any concluding remark that you want to make for today's session, or should we throw the floor open to questions? I leave it to you.
Yeah, well, my primary goal for today was really two things. One, make the case that analog is not only a high definition audio source, but is certainly still sounding better than digital once everything has been applied properly, right? And then secondly, just a couple very basics for those who might want to consider starting to enter the analog world. And I mentioned that isolation is very important. We want to make sure we avoid vibration from being able to enter the transcription instrument, the whole turntable rig. And then, of course, for people to know that they can certainly refer to my website and watch the many informational videos on the things at play. But it can, and I realize that it can be perhaps a little bit overwhelming initially for people. But it's a learning journey, and if you want to take advantage of everything that it has to offer, which is remarkable, it's going to take a little bit of an investment of your time and effort. Yeah.
A very interesting topic that you raised about vibration, isolation, and control. So I have been having this discussion with several people on in the world of audio, and I am going to be having a panel discussion on this topic in a subsequent masterclass session. A panel discussion on vibration, isolation, and why it is so less understood and probably less considered in the world of audio. It's such a very important topic and a very foundational topic in the world of audio, especially on the analog side of things. And something which a lot of, let's say, setup engineers or let's say installation engineers absolutely fail to give importance and even notice it. It's a
Yes.
very, very important aspect of the overall analog audio chain. And I think the more we know about it, I think the better it is for us to appreciate what what is required in terms of isolation and what isolation can bring about, proper
Yes.
isolation can bring about. Of course, we have had a session with Norman in the past, and Norman will be coming for that panel also, I believe. But I think there's a lot more left to be understood, especially on the topic of isolation, because it's a very, very misunderstood subject, as I understand. Because I've seen a
Yes.
lot of people actually misconstruing the ideas. It's very, very misunderstood, and a lot of wrong
Yes.
concepts are also being talked about.
Very much so. There are a lot of,
And
for example,
as a mechanical engineer myself, I think what I see a lot of that is plain gibberish. In fact,
Yes.
it's outright gibberish.
There is, yeah. And basically, here's the basic rule. If somebody's selling you a footer for your equipment that is rigid, all right, rigid in any of the moments of, well, let's just say vertical and horizontal moments of freedom, it's not isolating. It's just changing the mechanical impedance between the surface that it's sitting on and the component. Right? It's not isolating. It will change the sound. I've got no doubt about that, but it's not isolating. Yeah, and if you can do a quick A/B compared to a product that really is isolating, the answer is usually pretty clear about which is going to sound better, right? Yeah, I agree.
So coming back to the point of isolation, I think all these topics are essentially what are the foundational aspects of creating a low noise floor. So
Yes.
once
That's everything we're chasing is lowering the noise floor. Yep. Yep. Exactly.
So, Mazban, anything that you want to add at this point in time? I think we have, I would say that JR has concluded his part for today's session. Are there any questions from the audience that you might have? We have maybe time for about a couple of questions from the audience. So if anyone has a question, please unmute yourself and pose the question to JR.
Amit here again.
Yeah.
So strictly speaking, do we consider reel-to-reel as an analog sound, or is it electromechanical sound?
No, we certainly refer to it as analog, yes, and the engineers refer to it as analog, yes, because instead of having a mechanical representation of a waveform, it's a magnetic representation of a waveform, okay, on that tape. And I play reel to reel as well, and it's fabulous. It's actually a bit more of a pain in the butt to play than than vinyl. But yes, that's definitely analog. And another thing I'd say too is that one comment I hear from people very regularly who've rediscovered analog and now are shifting the majority of their listening time to analog, they say, my relationship to music has changed. I don't feel the need to quickly flip between tracks. I just like to hear the whole album, and I just sit and I relax, and it just feels right. I want to hear the artist, and I'm not thinking about what's next, which, I mean, you watch a lot of these people who are, not everybody, but many people are streaming there. Before the song is over, they're looking for their next one, right?
Yeah.
Right?
A beautiful point that you make, JR. It's a very, very, very pertinent point that you make about the changing of tracks when you're streaming. Very, very
It
pertinent.
makes people go hyper on selecting the next song.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to denigrate it. It's a different relationship, right? And what I hear from the people going into analog is that they're not changing to a different record or a different track because they're too lazy to get up. They're just enjoying just having that immersion, having that involvement, and letting the music wash over them as it was intended by the artist and the engineer, just letting it happen. So it's like as if the anxiety level has been taken down a couple notches, right?
Maybe just a last thing. In the subsequent session, it will be really helpful if somebody helps us identify the generation of a given vinyl, because I understand most of the recordings either used to happen on the reel to reel in the earlier days, or probably now directly digitally. So digital, it's a different domain though. But if it is getting recorded on the generation one, like through reel to reel, it would definitely sound much better than the vinyl. So vinyl probably can be fifth or sixth generation of the reproduction. Uh, the younger the generation, the audio quality will definitely be better, but it is really difficult for a layman who is entering into analog to identify the old, probably the youngest copy, not the
Mhm.
latest one, but the youngest copy. It will be, I think it is going to add more value to the people who are adopting to this lifestyle.
Yeah, so that's true. The further the generation, the more losses. You know, it's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, right? Um, but if if we're going to compare, like I've got a lot of copies of production masters on reel to reel. I got a lot of them, right? Copies of production masters on reel to reel, and recorded by very competent fellas, or rather dubbed by very competent fellas, and I've got quite a good reel to reel system. But the one thing that reel to reel does better than vinyl is pianissimo to fortissimo. That jump, that immediate jump, is just can be absolutely startling, right? Um, and then there's a little extra silken quality, and I don't know how else to explain it other than to use the word silken, to reel. But in other measures, my vinyl is keeping up, you know, inner detail, imaging, sound staging, low frequency content, in as much as the engineers will allow it to be in there in the groove in the first place. Yeah, hopefully, Amit, I didn't slaughter your question. Maybe it was more of a comment than anything else.
No, that was actually very helpful.
Okay.
In fact, personally, I choose the streaming to be like a menu card that we just have a look at when we go to the restaurant. And if I like the song, I'll get the vinyl.
Yes. Yeah, well, digital streaming is a fantastic way to identify new music. Absolutely. That's what I use it for.
Thank you very
Yep.
much.
Yes, you're welcome, Amit.
Okay, so I think we have come to the end of the session, as in we have overshot our time that we had allotted. So I must thank JR for sharing his wisdom today, and I look forward to having you very shortly, whenever time permits, from your end, once again for maybe a continuation to this session. This topic is so deep, and it's a topic that we all love very dearly from the bottom of our hearts, especially the lovers of analog, like analog audio. So I look forward to having you in the future also, JR. And to the audience, we are going to be having a very interesting speaker coming up next very shortly. He is the owner and founder of and the chief designer of this brand called Aries Serat. We're going to be having Stavros Danos very shortly in our upcoming session. He's a very good designer, in my opinion, and who gives a lot of thought to his designs. His designs are not for the common man, and I must say that a very radical approach to, let's say, audio design from his side. So we're going to be having Stavros in the next session very shortly, probably in the next 10 days or so. Yeah, so look forward to that. And so, without further any further questions, I think we'll come to an end to this session. And thanks once again, JR. Thanks everyone in the audience. And yeah, we will be uploading the session very shortly on YouTube for everyone's consumption. Thanks again, JR. and see you very
Thank
soon.
you. Thank you, Karthik.
Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
Master.
Take care. Bye.